I know from those of you who are not new, I know you did linear patterns last year because everyone does. Yes, you did. You may not remember them, but you did them. Now, so we're going to go through fairly quickly and look at some linear patterns. Okay. And then we're going to look at the one formula that you need to make sure you memorize in order to make these work. Now, there's some other things that we want to talk about that you need to be ready for, but we want to talk about.
I'm not ready for any.
You're not ready for any of it? Well, we'll get you there.
The last couple of things we've been learning have not made any sense to me, and I feel really behind.
Oh, you're not behind. Okay, so linear patterns and rules. So there are patterns all around us. So like I was talking about that pattern of how often the same day will happen at the same date, right? That's a pattern. There are patterns with temperatures and make seasons, etc. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first just review some ideas about linear patterns. You're going to have some homework on this, so you will be able to practice this a little bit if you need some practice. And for those of you who don't need the practice, you'll just sail right through it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at learning how to recognize some linear patterns and how to recognize it by looking at shapes. So for example, if you look at these patterns, how many squares is the first two? Then what? 4. Then 8. So this pattern is increasing by what? 2. Right. So after 8, what would be the next pattern? 10. So you see, you've had these skills before, but we're going to see them again. So it says that pattern increases by 2 each time. You can show this in a table. You will be required to draw these tables. And you need to be able to label them and fill them in properly. So the first part of the label is the number, right? So this one is not one box. It's the pattern number 1, exactly. And how many boxes did it have? 2. So N stands for the number. T stands for how many of whatever is shape it, whatever it had in it, right? So the second one had how many? 4. The third one had, and the fourth one had 8, etc. Okay?
Wait, Poppy, just feel warning. Maybe before you plan a birthday with someone, ask what age requirements.
We like to write it long ways, so is that fine? Okay.
It's perfectly fine. Yeah, either way. Yeah, and you're going to see that in just a second. Okay? So you need to be able to recognize a pattern and be able to predict the next term. So look at this pattern. 1, 4, 7, 10. What's happening?
16. Goes up by 3.
It goes up by 3. So what would the next term be? 16, 19. There you go. Okay? So it's just 3 more than the last one. Okay? These are called linear patterns. Guys, come on. And the reason they're called linear is because they go up by exactly the same amount each time. Now, there are other kinds of patterns. There are other kinds of patterns that don't increase by the same amount. And so there are different types of patterns that you can do. But what we're working on in this section are just linear patterns, and that means they increase by the same amount. Then if you drew these on a graph, you would get a straight line. Or they would fall in a straight line. Okay, and that's where they came up with the name linear, right? Okay. So, you need to be able to recognize patterns. Look at this one. 12, 10, 8, 6. What's happening? Yeah, it's going down 2. So how can I indicate that it's going down by 2? Put minus 2, right? So we would have like negative, or you could call it negative 2 if you like. Minus 2 or negative 2 is the thing. So what's the next number in this pattern? 4. 4. You're going down 2. Literally, this means down by 2. Okay? All right? Good job. Excellent. So they're describing the pattern.
My daughter
have a pattern. All right. So you're going to be doing things where you're drawing the next shapes, guys. You're drawing the next shapes and talking about what's the next number going to be. So you need to be able to recognize patterns by how many shapes there are, right? One shape, 2, 3, etc. And then be able to talk about what the next term is going to be. Okay? Yes.
Are we going to have to write a rule for them as well?
Yep, that's where we're going to be in a minute. Yeah. So look at these two patterns. The first one, 2, 4, 6, 8. We saw before.
3.
What's the next one?
3, 5, 6, 9.
Okay.
Starting by
Exactly. This has 3, and then 5, and then 7. So both of these patterns are increasing by 2. But the first one started with 2, and the second one started with what? 3. So you can have patterns that increase by the same amount, guys, that increase by the same amount, but you have different starting points. So they're going to give us a little bit different rule when we look at the rules. Okay? So the first one starts at 2, and the second one starts at 3. That starting number is very important for you. Okay? All right. So again, they're just explaining that. See this pattern. How many matches on the first one?
3.
And then the second one?
5.
Then?
7.
So it's going up by 2 every time. You bet. Okay? Excellent. Okay? So each one has 2 more. Okay? Now, they give you a visual way of thinking about this, but for us, what we really need to do is not think about it in the visual way. What we're going to do is we're going to use a pattern, or an algorithm. Do you remember the word algorithm? Algorithm simply means a method. And then something, yeah. Okay? Yeah. So.
First hexagon has as well.
Okay. Yep. So it happens every year. You'll even do it next year in year 10. Okay. So here we go. So now what we're going to do is we want to talk about a rule, a way of writing the rule for finding any pattern, because that's where we're going. We've looked at the patterns. Now let's talk about a way of writing the rule. Wow, that was odd. Okay.
It's like it's Monday.
So much homework on Monday. I told her, she said, did you have to do anything on Monday? I was like, no, I finished it all. And then...
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a way to be able to mathematically find a rule for any pattern. And there's a very simple formula for it that we'll talk about. So, if you look at the pattern, each triangle has 1 extra match from the first triangle, right? So we're going to learn how to be able to find, if we let the number of triangles t and the number of matches m, okay, then m is simply 2t. But patterns change. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a way to be able to identify any pattern using any rule. Okay, so this is what a rule looks like. All right, you have the number of whatever items, and we usually just call that one capital T, term, right? And we usually call that one N, right, for the number of items. Yeah.
Why did they write M?
They use M because they're doing matches and triangles, but we usually don't.
I was really bad at the term thing because I didn't understand where you plus the 1, where you wrote minus like 5, whatever. So we will work on it.
Well then, perfect. You're in exactly the right spot then. So let's look at this particular pattern. And you see they've gone back to N, meaning the number, and then T for the terms. So we're going to look at this particular pattern, and we're going to come up with a way to start with. So,
Well, Claudia.
we're so bad at this. Okay, here we go. So let's just look at it. We're going to use a process called, guys, the common difference.
Is this what we did last year?
All right? Now, guys, Common difference. If it's a common difference, first of all, what does difference mean? It's one of the mathematical operations. Well, yeah, but it's
like the difference between the link between the numbers.
It's one of the 4 operations. What? Subtraction. There you go. Subtraction. And if it's common, come on. If it's common, that means it's the same when? Every single time. So common difference. The first step is simply to subtract the second t, capital T, from the first.
I like that.
Okay? So, guys, so here's our first one is 14. Our second one is 11. So, 11 minus 14. What's that going to give me, guys?
3. Minus 3, sorry.
Minus 3. So, make sure you're doing them in order because it's important to know, are you going up, which is a plus, or you're going down, which is a minus. Okay? Then. Yes?
Don't you normally put the high number on top?
Well, this process we don't. Okay? Because we want to make sure that we get the minus because we need to know that it's going down. Okay? Subtract the third term, the third t, from the second. Okay? So what is the third one? And what's the first one? Oh, sorry. So, oops, I've done it backwards. It's 8 minus 11. Second of the first, the third one from the second, actually it's the second one from the third. So 8 minus 11 is what? And what do you notice there?
They both have the same number.
Right. So that means that is your common difference. Okay? What if I got a different number, guys? Shh. What if I got a different number when I was working on it? Then I've either subtracted them wrong or it's not linear then. Right? And there's a case where that could happen. All right. Now, that common difference then, all right, do you have that? Shh. Guys, that common difference is going to be our multiplier in our rule. Okay? So, right? Are you ready? Because I'm going to clear this writing. Then what have you been doing?
I'm going to just take a picture.
No. Guys, come on.
You know they're making a live action movie on Little Mermaid?
Yeah.
Not relevant, and you're being recorded. That common difference is the multiplier for our n. In our rule, we're going to have a t and we're going to have an n. It's going to be t equals something in front of n plus or minus some other number. Okay? Now, we don't always have the plus and minus. It doesn't always exist, but in general, it will, right? And this number in front of our n is always just the common difference, whatever the common difference was. So, in this case, okay, so in this difference, the number that goes in front of our n is what? Minus 3. Okay, so we have t equals minus 3n. Yes?
Well, that's something is that C?
What now?
Yeah,
CD. Common difference. Common difference. Right? All right. Now, usually, there's also going to be either a plus or a minus here. And we have to then find out what that number is by looking at our first number. Because what we'll do is we'll just test it and see if it gives us our first number. Okay? So does everybody have the writing? Because I need to move forward. Okay? All right. So we know that our pattern is starting off with t equals negative 3n. But let's just test these and see if that makes it true. So our t in the first column is 14 minus 3 times 1. 14 equals minus 3. Is that true? No. That tells us that there's going to be some number that we need to add or subtract to our number to get our starting point, our plus or minus here. Okay? So we need to talk about a way to get that. What do you think you can do to be able to get that number? Everything you need is right there. All we need to do... Okay, what answer did you get? It's 17?
Don't you minus 3 from...
Okay, right. So what you're going to need to do is simply take the two numbers that you have and add them together.
Exactly. You add 3 to 14, and then you do... Not 17.
So simply add those numbers. Now, ignore the sign. Okay, so it's 14 plus 3, which gives you 17. In other words, what would you subtract 3 from to get the 14 that you need? 17. Okay? And you can always find that by simply adding those numbers. Okay, now look at it. Or if this was a positive number, then wouldn't we add those numbers? Right, you're going to have more than you need, so you need to subtract. And we'll do several examples so that you can see. So that completes our pattern. It's t equals negative 3n plus 17. Make sure, though, that once you've gotten it, that you test. So let's test the 8. 8 it should equal negative 3 times 3 plus 17. 8 equal, but because it's the third one, right? The n. So negative 9 plus 17. So 8 equals 8. Does that check?
Yes.
Yes. So you're going to have to work on your integers here a little bit. But remember, you can use a calculator on this as well. And your calculator has a sign key on it. So you can use your sign key on your calculator as well.
The tabs, I never understood them.
Super simple. Right?
Why is it minus 3n? Basically.
Because that was the common difference. We subtracted this minus that, and then this minus that. That's the common difference. All right.
Okay, well, why do we have to times 3? Minus 3 times the number, because it's the number of...
Whatever that common difference is, it's always the multiplier in front of your n. That's just where it goes. Okay? All right.
Okay, we need to do another one.
All right. We will do lots of them. This is all we're going to do today. So, okay. Here we go. So they decrease by 3. So you get to rule negative 3. We said that didn't work. So then we had to think of another number to be able to get that 14. And that gave us our new rules. So let's see what else they give us. Okay, here we go. We have another pattern. Now, I like, if I just have a pattern like this, I like to write it in the boxes with your N and T. It makes life a lot easier, right? So we'll just put a few of these down. We don't need the whole pattern. 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, right? That's the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, and fifth one. To get a pattern, we don't need them all, right? We just need to have at least 2 of them to be able to test.
Okay, should I write this down?
You bet you should. So, to get from 9 to 7, so we'll take the 9 minus 7, which gives us what? 2. Then we'll do this one minus that one. 11 minus 9, which gives us what? 2. So, we found out that our common difference is what? 2. Okay? Now, that goes in to our formula. Remember, there's something in front of n plus or minus some other number, right? That's our formula. So all we're doing is filling in a formula. So where does that 2 go? In front of the n. Okay? Then we'll simply test it. It just always, whatever number you get when you do the subtraction, just goes in front of the n. Okay? All right. So whatever number you get, once you subtract those, just goes in front of your n. But now we need to test it to see if it works. And always just test it using the first number. So t equals 2 times 1. And our t in that case is 7. And 2 times 1 is what? 2. Does 7 equal 2?
Yeah.
No. That tells us we have either an addition or a multiplication to do. So what plus 2 would give us 7? So we need to add 5 to our... Remember, if this is positive, all we need to do is simply subtract it to find our number. Okay? All right? So...
Okay. To find
Okay.
the common difference, you also just find it, like, 7 plus 1 is 9, and 9 plus 1 is 11.
I've got that, but that's chill.
Could you do that as well?
Right, that's how we found our common difference. All right, so let's write our steps on a blank piece of paper so that you can see them without all this other stuff. Okay? All right. Okay. To find the rule. First, find the common difference. I'm going to write down a couple of steps for that. Second t minus the first t equals something.
What are the different T's?
T's, remember t is the terms, right? Remember when you had...
Common difference. I've already done this.
Right. So you have an n here and you have a t there. Okay? But that's not enough to get us the common difference. That just gives us the first one. We need to make sure to check it. So always do a second one. Take the third one minus the second one equals some number. Right? And make sure to always do at least 2 so that you know you have the right common difference. Okay? Also, make sure you're doing them in that order. It's this one minus this one minus this one, or you won't get the right sign. Because your common difference can either be a positive number or a what? Negative number. It's very important. Okay? Once you have that common difference is the... Oh, dare I use a math word?
In a math class? No way.
This is where I'm trying to actually figure out how to...
Coefficient of n in the formula, multiplier, in the formula, t equals an plus b.
Our class is called A.
It's the multiple of n.
Okay? It's the multiplier of n. So, in other words, it goes right there in front of the n. Right? And they go side by side, which always indicates the operation of multiply. Excellent. Okay? So, this is always a formula, our formula. Okay?
Well, we didn't say common difference. We just said what's the difference between the numbers going up. So we just said...
You might have called it different, but yeah.
Basically,
Third.
the difference is add, subtract by 3.
Okay, here we go. Third. Test the first t into the formula. And what I mean is simply substitute the t into that t value into the formula. And so remember, again, your t value is this one right there in the front. Right? That's your t. So that's what I mean. Okay?
Okay, sorry.
Which is this first T right there. Okay?
Only one T though. So can't you say the T?
No, because there'll be a lot of T's. There'll be like 9, 11, 13, 15. There's a whole row of them. It's a pattern, right? Okay? Now,
This first T into the formula. How do you do that?
you just plug it in and do the math. And we'll do an example in a minute. Just get your notes right now, and then we'll do the thing. All right. Okay, now.
This is all just being far beyond my brain cells.
4. If it works, you're done. Into the formula. If it works, then you're done, right? If you get the right answer, then you're finished. If not, okay, then 2 cases. If you have T equals a negative, then add. Because you're only going to have 2 numbers. They're going to have 2 numbers separated by an equal symbol. Add them together. But if T equals a positive, then don't add, but what? Subtract. You're solving an equation is the reason you're doing the opposite. Do you remember how to solve equations? You solve equations by doing the opposite when you move something across the equal symbol. And that's what's happening is you're moving it across the equal symbol, and that's going to tell you your common difference. Okay? I mean, I'm going to give you plenty of examples. This gives you what we call the B in our formula. T equals AN plus B, right? So that is your common difference. This is the number that you got from step 5. It's super easy, but you just need to practice it and get it. So,
I don't have enough brain cells.
no, you have plenty. Yes, you do. Come on. All right, so here we go. Let's look at 1. Okay.
Okay, I'm not going to write anything. I'm just going to focus.
Okay. All right. So let's look. Here we go. Here we have a pattern, guys. Are we ready? Okay. It's 10, 15, 20, whatever. So let's go ahead and just put it on paper.
5.
Okay. So we have N and T. This 10, 15, 20, 25. Well, hold on. Let's do it using the pattern. Jumping around and guessing is one reason why it doesn't make sense later. All right? When it's not so obvious. So first, we need to first find the common difference, right? So I'm going to take this one minus this one. So it's 15 minus 10, which is what? 5. And it's a positive 5. That's very important, right? Then we'll take this one minus this one. 20 minus 15 is what? 5. So our common difference is 5. Remember our formula. T equals what?
5.
AN plus B. Just the blank formula. Mm-hmm.
If it's like that and you can see that it's 5, you still need to work it out?
I don't have to see this math, but you better be careful though, okay? Because they don't always. So that number, this common difference, goes where? In place of what? The A. So I know that I have T equals 5N. And many times, that's the formula. But we have to test it to see. Okay? So test. And we're always going to test with this first number. And that first number is a what value? Is a T, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to put T equals 5 times, what's the N for that number? 1. And it always is 1. That's why you pick the first one, because it never changes. So we get 10 equals 5. Is that true? No. That tells us that we're going to have either something to add or subtract at the end. So I've got to move this 5 over there. Well, how do I move a positive 5?
When you take away 5, then you also have to take away 5 from the
Right. So what we're basically doing is solving an equation. And that gives us 5 equals 0, right? So that 5 becomes our B. So, and it's positive 5. And there's our rule.
Oh yeah, because if you do 1 times 10 plus 5 is
Do you just see what the difference is? Do you understand how
Now I bring
Okay.
Do you know how to use the plus 5?
It might be logic, but I'm not very logical.
You go 5 times 8.
See, that's a plus 5 right there, right? So 5. So that's our B. That's the thing we need to add to it to finish off our formula.
You go 5 times n, and n is 1, right? Which is 5. But that's not 10, so how many would you have to add to the 10? Subtract 5. So you go plus 1.
I need 5 more.
And if you do 5 times 2, that's 10.
That's 10.
Plus 5 is 15.
Right? And that gives you your...
Do another one. I think. But the thing is, I've gotten to this stage so many times.
I don't know for all 3 of you.
and I just forget.
Okay, well, let's look at another one. Okay? Okay, here we go. Here, this one, we have a series of lines. The number of lines in this pattern increasing. So we need to make a pattern, right? Are we counting the number of shapes? No, it's the number of lines. So 1, 2, 3, 4. How many lines in the first one?
5.
That's a lot of numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. How many in the second one? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
13 is 7 plus 6 is 13.
Yeah, and there you go. Then there's...
No, let me do it. It's 19.
There you go. And blah, 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 right? So let's first find our common difference. So we'll take 13 minus 7. Okay. Take 19 minus 13. So our common difference is 6. Our formula is T equals AN plus B. Where does that 6 go? T equals 6N. Okay? Now let's test our first one. So it's 7. 7 equals 6 times 1. 7 equals 6. Is that good enough?
No.
What do I need to add to a 6 to make 7?
1.
So that's our B.
Why did we get a 7 now? Oh, because it says
That's our first term. You always use the first term.
And then 6
I just dropped
12
water
is
all over my
14.
Okay, I get
6
it now.
times 3 is 14.
Okay? Now again, you could have gotten that by subtracting the 6 from both of them. That gives you 1 as well.
Can you leave this here so I can write it down?
Okay? Write it down. Okay? So that rule is what you need to focus on right now. Okay? That's really today's lesson. You need to be able to use that rule. Because for this level, we're not just looking for the linear pattern. We're now going to expand that idea of linear patterns into other ways, into using it in other ways. So you must be able to find the rule, and so we can move on. Yes?